Internet Explorer 7. Internet Explorer version 7 is the latest version of Microsoft Internet Explorer, and quite a lot has changed in this new version. Now firstly, I will point out that IE 7 isn't just a Windows Vista release. You can download it from Windows Update and run it on Windows XP and Windows Server 2003 as well, but in Vista, IE 7 does offer better security as it can take advantage of user account control to limit damage that a malicious website can do to your operating system via Internet Explorer. By the way, the first time that you fire up Internet Explorer, you'll need to click on Start and then choose Internet Explorer from the Start menu. Now once you've launched IE for the first time, it'll automatically be added down here to the quick launch bar for easy access. And of course, you can remove it from here if you like by simply right-clicking on it and selecting Delete. Okay, when you fire up IE 7 for the first time, you might notice that a few things have changed since version 6. Firstly, as with a lot of the latest Microsoft products, there's now no menu bar at the top of the window. Now these functions have been moved over to the right here, accessed by these buttons. Now you might also notice that our default web page here appears on a tab, which introduces one of the greatest features of Internet Explorer 7, tab browsing. Now tab browsing has been available in other web browsers like Firefox for a while now, so whilst this isn't groundbreaking technology here, once you start using tab browsing, you certainly won't want to go back to the old way of doing things, so it's great that Microsoft have finally introduced it. Okay, so here we have the default web page, which is obviously set to MSN, but we can certainly change that if we like. So let's go and open up a new tab so we can first see how tabs can be useful. Now we can either right-click on an existing tab and choose New Tab, or we can click this small little tab icon here to the right-hand side of our tab, and that's going to open a new tab. Or we could simply press Ctrl-T on our keyboard, and that'll do the same thing. Now when we open up a new tab, you'll be presented with this page that you see here, telling you a bit about what you can do with tabs. And if we click on this Show More Tab Shortcuts link here, you'll see a whole bunch of shortcuts that you can use, some of which I use quite frequently, like for example control clicking on a link in a web page, and that'll open up that link on a new tab, or perhaps hitting Alt and Enter in the address bar, which will also open up a URL on a new tab. Now once you have a few tabs open, it's easy to switch back and forth between the web page by simply clicking on the tab at the top. And this is far more user-friendly than the way we used to do it, which of course was by having dozens of IE windows down here on your taskbar. So now we only have one item on our taskbar, but of course we can have lots of tabs. Now if I quickly go and hit Ctrl-T a few times, you'll notice that these left and right arrows here appear at the top of our screen, and that allows us to display our tabs to the left or right if you've got more tabs than will appear across the screen. And if you want to have a quick look at all of the web page that you've got open in IE at the moment, you can either click on this little icon here, or we can press Ctrl-Q on our keyboard, and this will show you a single page with a thumbnail view of all the pages that you're currently viewing. Now from here you can either click on the little X here in the top right to close each window, or you could right click on them and choose Close, or we could choose to close every tab bar the one we've currently got selected here. Now we could also refresh an individual page or all of them as well. Now if you want to view one of these pages, simply left click on it and that'll bring that tab to the front. Alright, now when we went and opened up a new tab, it showed us this new tab window like you see here. So let's go and customize IE so that this is going to open up something else, and preferably this would probably want to be your home page. So I'm going to click this box here to not show this again, and we'll choose Close. And now, as it stands, each new tab that we add is going to default to this old About Blank page you've probably seen with older versions of IE. Alright, so we'll come over here to the right and we'll click on our Tools drop-down menu. And at the bottom we'll choose Internet Options. And over here on the left, under our Tabs heading, we'll click on the Settings button. Okay, right at the top here we can see that the default is to enable tabbed browsing, which of course is enabled, and I can't see any reason why you'd want to turn it off, but of course you can if you want to get back to the old way of doing things. The next setting here is to warn us when we close multiple tabs, and this is a good thing because the last thing you want to have happen is to accidentally close down IE and you haven't either read or added a page to your favourites, and this setting is going to throw up a dialog box asking us if we're sure that we want to close IE. So unless you're Mr. or Mrs. extra careful, I'd advise leaving this box checked. Now when you do create a new tab using Control-T or control-clicking on a link, the web page won't be made the active tab by default, but you could certainly change this by clicking the next box here. Now enabling quick tabs is the page that allowed us to see all of our tabs in thumbnail view like we saw a moment ago, and you can certainly turn off this feature if you like. Okay, well the next setting here is to only open the first home page when IE starts. Now this brings us to another feature of IE. Yeah, you can set multiple home pages. Now the truth is, it isn't really multiple home pages as such, but it will allow you to create a list of default web pages that you can open automatically when you start IE. Now this is actually quite a good feature for obvious reasons. It enables you to start IE and have all of the websites you normally go to automatically fired up. Now the downside, and yeah there's always a downside, is that for every page you choose to fire up, the longer IE will take to load before it hands off control to you. Alright, so let's go and cancel this for a moment and we'll go and take a look at how this feature works. So firstly we'll go and fire up a couple of websites. Now we've already got MSN open, so let's go and fire up Google, and we'll also go and load, say, Yahoo, and let's go and open up another one as well, and we'll say Microsoft.com. Now in case you're wondering, to get IE to automatically fill in the rest of that URL, I was just hitting Control-Enter on my keyboard here, and that of course fills in this http:// and the .com. Alright, so we've got 4 sites loaded in IE now. We've got MSN, Google, Yahoo, and Microsoft's website. Okay, so we'll come over here to the right and we'll click on this little down arrow icon next to our home icon, and this brings us to a drop down menu, and from here we can select our home page, which of course you can do by clicking the much larger home icon anyway. We could also add or change a home page and remove them as well. Okay, so if we click on add or change, we can choose to make this web page, which is obviously the MSN homepage, as our only homepage. We can choose to add this page to our homepage tab, or make every tab that we currently have open our homepage. Now, a word of warning, like I said before, if you add too many new sites to your homepage tabs, it will affect the startup time of IE, so take particular care when choosing the last option here. Alright, well let's just use the first option here for now. We'll make MSN our only homepage and we'll click yes. Alright, now if we go and click on our down arrow icon again next to the home icon, we can see that our first homepage is now set to MSN. So if we come down here and we'll click on our Explorer icon in our quick launch here, it's going to open up a new browser with MSN loaded as the homepage. Alright, so we'll go and close this. And we'll go and click on our down arrow icon again, and if we choose remove, we can now see that MSN is listed as a home page that we can now remove if we no longer want it. Okay, well let's go and click on, say, our Yahoo tab, and we'll click on our down arrow icon again, and we'll choose add or change homepage. Now this time, if we select the top option again, and then click yes, and we'll open up a new browser, this time we can see that Yahoo has replaced MSN as our homepage. Alright, well back at our other browser again, we'll go and click on the MSN tab and we'll go to our homepage options here again. We'll choose add or change, but this time we'll choose to add MSN to our homepage tabs and we'll click yes. And we'll go and open up another browser again. Now this time, IE opens up with both Yahoo and MSN as our homepage tabs, but since Yahoo is the default homepage, it becomes the active tab. Now by the way, if we close IE, since we now have 2 or more tabs open, here you can see the warning message asking us if we're sure we do want to close all of these tabs. Now if we click on the Show Options button here, we can choose to open all of the pages that we've currently got open now the next time we fire up IE. And of course we can turn off this dialog box, which is the same as unchecking the box we saw earlier in our tab settings. Now by the way, if we choose to open up these web pages the next time that we fire up IE, this setting here only works for the next IE that we open. It won't save this setting for any subsequent restarts. So what's going to happen is this. Since our home pages are currently set to Yahoo and MSN, and what do I have open at the moment? Yahoo and MSN. If I check this box and then click on Close Tabs, then IE, the next time we fire it up, is going to fire up each of those pages twice, since it's going to fire up whatever pages I had loaded and my default home pages. So if we go and fire up IE again, sure enough, as you can see, we've now got 2 copies of both websites. Okay, if we go and click on our down arrow icon again, and we'll do this one last time, we'll go and click on Add or Change Home Page, and we'll use the bottom option here to grab all of our tabs and set them as our home page. So we'll say yes, and we'll go and close our browser down, and we'll open it up again. Alright, and this time you can see we've got a whole bunch of sites opening automatically. So whilst this is a good feature, be careful that this is what you want to do, because you don't want to be sitting there waiting for heaps of sites to be loading every time you open IE. In fact, I'm just going to go and close a couple of these unwanted tabs here. Alright, well let's go and click on Tools again. We'll choose Internet Options, and we'll go back to our tab settings. And the next item we have here in the list is to choose to open any new tabs next to the current tab. Now this means that if I've got 10 tabs open here across the top for argument's sake, and I'm currently selected the second tab and I open a new one, then the new web page is going to appear next to it as the third tab, and all the others are going to move across in the list. Now, if I turn this feature off, then all new tabs are going to appear on the right-hand side. Now finally, when we choose to open up a new tab, instead of it opening up with the default page like we saw earlier, the one that showed you all the shortcuts, or our About blank page, we can have IE open up the default web page instead. And personally, I like to turn this feature on so that it opens my home page, which is set to a search engine. In this case, we've currently set it to Yahoo, because I like my most commonly used web page, which is often a search engine, to be my default page. Okay, now when a pop-up is encountered, and let's face it, we all really love pop-ups, the default is to open all pop-ups in a new window, but we could change that to let IE decide, or we could simply open them up in a new tab. Now the last item here is to open up links from other programs in a new tab in the current IE session, or we could open up another copy of IE, or replace whatever we currently have open in our existing tab. And finally, if you totally muck everything up, you can restore all the defaults here as well. Now speaking of home pages, at the top of this window here you can enter in a list of home pages if you like. Now under our browsing history, we can delete any temporary or otherwise personal information from IE. So we can delete our temporary internet files, cookies, we can remove the history from our browser so your boss or significant other can't see what naughty sites you've been visiting. We can also remove any form data that we might have entered into forms, such as your name, address and credit card information. And finally, we can delete any passwords that we might have chosen to save when we've logged in protected websites. Now down the bottom, we can also choose to delete all of these things here as well. You know, one thing that IE wasn't very good for in the past was handling a lot of data. One of my friends is heavily into photography and web design, and as such he downloads a lot of images from the internet. And one day he calls me up about a problem he's having with IE. Every time he tried to right-click on an image and choose Save, it would only let him save that file as a bitmap and not a JPEG. Now the solution in his case was pretty simple. All we had to do was remove the temporary internet files, which is the button at the top here, and the problem was solved. It turns out that his temporary internet directory had gotten so big that IE simply cracked it at him, and that was the cause of his problem. Now hopefully that sort of stuff doesn't happen with IE 7, but if it does, that should fix the problem anyway. Now if we go and take a look at our browsing history settings, IE stores web pages, images and media in the IE cache to make retrieving the same page again much quicker the second time around. But we can get IE to check if a newer item exists, and that could be a newer updated web page or anything that's changed on the web page that we're trying to load. Now IE by default will automatically check to see if anything's changed, but you can change this to check only when we visit the website, every time we start IE, or never. Now in most cases I'd simply leave the default as it is. Now we can also set how much disk space we'll allow this cache to be. Now the default here is set to 50 meg, but we can change this from as little as 8 meg all the way up to a gig of space. And this could have also been a solution to my friend's problem as well, by the way, simply making his cache larger, and he would be able to download and store more data in the cache. Now the cache by default is stored at this location here in the users folder, then whatever your username is, app data, local, Microsoft, Windows temporary internet files, and if we click on the move folder button, we can then choose to move this to another folder if you like, although I will point out that one thing is missing from this dialog box, and that's the ability to make a new folder. So just make sure if you do want to move your IE cache somewhere else that you do go and create a folder ahead of time for it. Now if you do want to take a look at any of the downloaded files, you can click on the View Objects button or click on the View Files button to view your temporary internet files, and then both of these are simply going to open up Windows Explorer at the correct folder, and that'll save you from manually having to go and find it. Okay, the next option we have here is to change our search defaults as well. Now by default we only have one item in here, and that's to use Microsoft's Live Search. So from this window here, we can set the default if we happen to have more than one in the list here, and of course we can remove any search providers from this list. Now if you want to add in more search providers, you can come down here and click on this Find More Providers link. And this will take you off to a Microsoft site where we could say, add in Google if we like. And this will open up a new dialog box where we can now add in Google. We could also make it the default search provider if we like. Now I'm just going to click on Add Provider, and I'll show you how to make it the default another way. Okay, so we'll now go back to our search settings again. And now here we could select Google and choose to make Google the default. But of course, as with practically every Microsoft Windows product, there is another way of doing the same thing, so we'll just cancel this for now, and we'll come up here to our search box and we'll click the little down arrow icon here. Now we can manually select Google from the list if we like, or down the bottom we can click on Change Search Defaults, and then simply select the provider in the list and choose Set Default button. So either way, whether you do it from the settings window or here, it's the same thing. Now also, if you do want to add in more search providers, you can do that from here as well. Just simply click on the down arrow icon and choose Find More Providers, and that's going to take you off to the same Microsoft website we saw a moment ago. Alright, so now that we have our providers configured, we can now use this search bar to automatically search our favorite search engine. And a little tip here, if you type something into this search bar, we'll just type in test, and you hold down the Alt key and hit enter, it's going to open up that search in a brand new tab. Alright, well let's go and click on the Tools menu again and see what other options we have. Now firstly, we can remove any browsing history that we might have stored up on this machine. So if you don't want your spouse or your boss to find out where you've been going, you can remove all that. Of course, IE has an inbuilt pop-up blocker, and we have options to turn it off, which I certainly wouldn't recommend, and we have our pop-up blocker settings. So let's choose settings, and this allows us to add in a list of sites that we know have pop-ups, but we still want to allow them to pop up, so you can simply enter in a URL here and click on the add button. Now by default, IE will play a sound and show a little yellow drop-down box up here if a pop-up is detected for any blocked pop-up window, and you can simply right-click on that little yellow bar and allow the pop-up if you like. Now, by the way, if you absolutely hate the sound that IE plays when it blocks a pop-up, you can change it. So if we'll go and click on Start, and we'll launch the control panel, then here under Hardware and Sound, we'll click that link. And under Sound, we'll choose Change System Sounds. Now, if we scroll down a little bit past halfway, here is the blocked pop-up window sound. So if you select that, you can then click on Browse, and you can go and select a different WAV file, which is more to your liking. Okay, well, back to our pop-ups here. The default is set to medium, and this blocks most pop-ups, but you can set this to high to block every pop-up, or you could set it to low, which will allow pop-ups from secure sites like banks, which in my experience are notorious for opening up new windows. Okay, well, the next option that we have on our Tools menu is the Phishing Filter. Now, this is a new feature of IE7 in that by default, IE7 will automatically check each website you go to and see if it's on a list of known phishing sites. And this list is maintained by Microsoft, and it's updated several times each hour. And you've probably been the recipient of a phishing attempt before. You've probably had an email or two claiming to be from eBay or PayPal or a bank, telling you that you must click on this link and change your password or your account's going to be suspended or something like that. Of course, if you click that link, it'll take you off to a website which looks like the original, but it certainly isn't. So the unsuspecting user tries to log in, and now the bad guys have your password. So the general rule is don't click on these links. If you're unsure if it's legitimate or not, you can normally tell from an email that has a link. If you hover your mouse over it in Microsoft Outlook, this will show the real URL, which is normally an IP address, and not paypal.com or ebay.com or whatever your bank is. Now, either way, this phishing filter here is built into IE and it's on by default, and I can't think of a reason why you'd want to turn it off. Now, we can choose to check a website that we're currently on, but of course it will be checked by default anyway. We can turn off automatic website checking, which I would not recommend. We can report a website that's nasty if we find one and the filter doesn't pick up on it. And we can take a look at our settings. So we'll choose Settings, and this simply takes us to the Advanced tab of our Internet options. So if we scroll down towards the bottom of the list here, we can choose to disable the phishing filter or turn off automatic checking, both of which I personally wouldn't do. But if you do choose to turn off automatic website checking, of course you can come back up here, we'll choose phishing filter, and you can manually check the website. Now, if you do happen to come across a known website that Microsoft has determined to be a phishing site, it will block you from entering any personal details. Now, if it's unsure, it may be flagged as suspicious and you'll simply get a warning, and up here in the address bar, this will change to a pinky red background to give you a visual cue that something's wrong. Alright, on our Tools menu here, the next option we have here is to manage any Internet Explorer add-ons such as third-party toolbars and other utilities that have been designed for IE. So if we click Enable or Disable Add-ons, we can select any add-ons from the list here and choose to either enable or disable them using the radio buttons below, and we can also delete any ActiveX controls as well. Now, if you want, you can also choose to force IE to work offline. You can launch Windows Update and work full screen, and you can hit F11 on your keyboard to toggle between full screen and the default windowed mode. And by the way, for those of you that are interested in learning more about these keyboard shortcuts, I'll make sure that the guys put up a page on the Winstructor website with a full list of these shortcuts, so go and check out the articles section and it'll be there for your reference. Now, we can also choose to display the old style menu bar if we like, and this forces a menu bar to come up the top of our screen here. But if you only want to access something from the old menu bar temporarily, then just hit Alt on your keyboard and that'll display our menu bar. Now, one of the other new features of IE7 is RSS Feeds. Whilst RSS Feeds aren't a particularly new thing, previous versions of IE didn't support RSS Feeds, so you had to move to a third-party product. Now, RSS, in case you don't know what it is, stands for Really Simple Syndication and is a method of subscribing to a frequently updated website so that the latest news and articles or blog posts are automatically downloaded for you to read. So if we go and point our browser to a news site, let's say foxnews.com, if IE detects that this website is offering a feed to subscribe to, then this icon up here will change to an orange, indicating that a feed is available. So if we click on this icon, it'll take us to this page where we can now subscribe to the feed, and over here on the left hand side of this site you can see the link here to subscribe. So we'll click this, and this brings up a new window here where we can save a link to the feed just like we would save a regular old favourite. Now in this case I'll be saving a feed to Fox News. The default is to save it in the feeds folder, but of course we can create a new one if we like. So I'll click subscribe, and now we're subscribed to this feed, and any updated content will be automatically downloaded by IE when it's available. And to view these feeds, we'll come up here, we'll click on this little yellow star icon, and we can see it defaults to our favourites, and we'll select the feeds button, and if any new articles have been released, then our feed favourite here is going to turn bold, indicating that there's new content available. So if we right click on our Fox News feed here and choose properties, the default here is to check once a day for any new content, but we can change it if we like. We click on the settings button here and select this drop down box, and we can change it to more or less frequently. Now we'll also by default automatically mark a feed as read once we've read it, and feed reading view is also turned on by default. Now if you turn this feature off, in most cases you're going to simply get an XML page return rather than a nicely formatted document like you see here. Now finally we could choose to play a sound if we find a feed on a web page that we like. Now we can also choose to download any files attached to the feed, such as where the author of an article references a file such as a podcast or a binary file. And if you do have any downloaded files via this mechanism, then you can click on the View Files button here to go and check them out. Now at the bottom here we can set the maximum number of updates we want to save for this feed, and the default, as you can see here, is 200, but we could change this anywhere up to 2,500. Now when we view our feed, we can also choose to filter this by date, by title, or by author. So if I click on, say, title, then this list here changes into alphabetical order. Now up in this search box here, if I type in a word that appears on this page, let's say women, then this will only show us the articles that have the word women in them. Now from this list on the left, we can simply click on the link, and this takes us straight to the article. So these feeds are useful since they don't go and download the entire article. It's only a small bit of text, and you can see at a glance what takes your interest and then go directly to the article without having to manually go and search through the whole entire website. Now from here, you could print, email, or add this web page to your favourites if you like. Oh, and speaking of favourites, one of the tips that people seem to like is this useful one regarding favourites. Let's say I really want to keep a copy of this Fox News article here. Now sure, I could come over here and click on this little green plus icon over the yellow star and choose Add to Favorites, or I could hit Control D on my keyboard, but I'm sure you already knew that one. But let's say I click Add to Favorites, and instead of storing our favourite with this long name here, I'll rename it to something shorter. I'll just say FN for Fox News, and we'll click Add. Alright, well let's go and close this browser window, and we'll close this one as well. We'll go and open up a new copy of IE with our 150 tabs that we added. Alright, now we'll go to our address bar and we'll simply type in FN and hit enter. And the Fox News article that we added to our favourites loads automatically, which is rather cool. Now, the only gotcha with this is that you must save that favourite in the root of your favourites folder. So, if we click our favourites again, we can see here our favourite is in the root. Now, if I happen to, say, drag and drop this into this Windows Live folder, and now go and run FN, as you can see, it doesn't work. Now, by the way, another new feature in IE7 regarding favourites is this. If we go and click on the Add Favourites icon again, we have an option here of adding a tab group to our favorites as well. Or in other words, all of our tabs to our favorites, which saves you from having to do it manually. So let's select this, and we'll need to give this tab group a name, and I'm just going to call this one Stuff, and we'll click Add. Now if we go and click on our favorites icon, you can see here we've got another directory or another folder called Stuff, and this contains a favorite for all of our web pages that are currently listed up here. Alright, now while we have our favorites open, if we go and click on the History button here, we can search through our history by date, site, most visited, and in the order that we've visited today. Now whilst this can be a privacy issue for some people, because some people don't like to leave a trail of where they've been, personally I think this is also a nifty feature, as often myself, I've gone to a website, I've forgotten to add it to my favorites, and now for the life of me I can't remember what the site was. So if I click on, say, the order visited today, there's a list of all the websites I've gone to today, and that'll hold the website that I'm currently looking for. Of course, if I opted to display them by date, then I can go back further than a day as well. Now, one of the other things that have changed in IE, which is for the better, is security. In earlier versions of IE, unwanted and malicious ActiveX controls or programs could easily be installed, causing the users no end of problems. Now in IE7, we've now got several layers, if you like, of security to prevent these things from happening. Firstly, we have the Popup Blocker that can stop unwanted web pages from trying to open new windows on us. We've got the Phishing Filter, which can block potentially malicious sites from leaching our personal information. And since IE7 on Windows Vista by default runs in protected mode, and we can see down here protected mode is on by default, it will give you the ability to block websites from automatically attempting to install ActiveX controls. So to demonstrate this, let's just go and point our browser to apple.com, and we'll click on the QuickTime link. Okay, here you can see that Apple's website has attempted to download an ActiveX control to our computer. Now if this wasn't a major vendor's website, you'd probably be clamoring to click on cancel right now, but at least in this instance the download is fine. It only wants to install QuickTime so I can view their streaming movies. Now protected mode in IE7 is a Vista only bonus, which means that IE7 runs with much lower privileges than previous versions of IE. This means that if a malicious site or a rogue add-on can somehow get IE to run its code, then it will run with a lesser account and not administrator credentials, which lessens the likelihood of it doing something really bad to your system. Okay, well let's go back to our Tools menu and we'll select Internet Options, as we still have a few things in here that I do want to cover in this video. Alright, the next tab we have is the Security tab, and this is all pretty much the same as in IE6. We still got our Internet, local intranet zones, our trusted sites, and our restricted sites. So to add URLs to any of these, simply select the zone and then click on the Sites button. And just simply add in the link. So the way this all works here, for those of you that haven't played around with zones, is that, say, for the Internet zone, this defines the settings to all destinations on the web, excluding those URLs that are found in the trusted sites and restricted sites. Now down the bottom of this window here, we can see on this slider bar here that the Internet zone defaults to medium to high security, and if we slide this bar up or down, the description of what this security level allows changes, so you can see how increasing or decreasing security for this zone is going to affect your browsing experience. Of course, if you happen to be joined to a domain, you can override all these settings using group policy. Okay, so our other zones here, the Intranet Zone refers to all sites that are found on your internal network, such as your own internal web server or portal server. Trusted sites here are sites that you obviously know and trust not to be harmful, although downloading potentially unsafe code is still going to prompt you. And finally, we have restricted sites that allows you to define sites that will be blocked without hesitation. Now if you want, you can modify any of these zones. You can click on the custom level button and you can run through this list here, and it's a rather long list, but you can enable or disable whatever you like. So I'll leave that up to you. Okay, the next tab we have here is the Privacy tab, and we can set how we want to handle cookies downloaded from websites from our Intranet Zone, and we can see here the default is medium, which allows cookies unless they fall into these categories here. But you can of course change this if you like. Now a cookie, in case you don't know, is simply a text file that contains a little bit of data about you, such as your username, any website preferences, and when you last visited. Now if you do want to override these defaults for a particular website, we click on the Sites button and we can enter in a URL here and choose to allow or block all cookies entirely. Now if you happen to have saved your preferences for cookie handling, you can choose to import them and bring them into IE7, and if we click on the Advanced button, we can define how we want to handle cookies. Now if we check this box here to override the automatic cookie handling, we can set how we want to handle first-party and third-party cookies. Now a first-party cookie is simply one that's sent by the actual website that you're visiting, whereas a third-party cookie is normally set by a link on the page of the site that you're visiting, such as an advertiser on a banner ad. So here you can choose whether to accept them, whether to block them, or to prompt you and ask you what you want to do. Now at the bottom here we can also choose to accept session cookies, which are cookies that supposedly are not persistent. So in other words, they should not be saved and only stay on your system while you log into a website, for example, and they should be deleted when you log out. Now obviously it doesn't always work this way. So for example, if you close the browser without logging out of the website, often the cookie doesn't crumble and it stays on your hard drive. Okay, the next tab we have here is the Content tab. And on the Content tab here, IE7 provides parental controls so you can safely monitor what your kids or your significant other is up to. Now this was and probably still is a contentious issue with people screaming about right to privacy and so on, but as a parent myself, I want my young children to only be visiting websites that I deem appropriate. Now if we click on this button, and we'll click on the user account control message to continue, we'll first need to set up a user account that we wish to monitor. Now if we don't have another account already set up, we'll come down here, we'll click on the Create New User Account, and I'll just enter in a username, we'll say Bob, and we'll click the Create Account button. Okay, now since parental controls are disabled by default, we can check this radio button here to enable it. And now once we click OK, we'll begin collecting activity data about this user. Now if we come over here and click on our web filter link, we can choose to block some websites, which is the default, or to allow access to all websites, but we'll still be monitoring which one this user Bob here goes to. Now if I choose to edit the allow and block list here, I can then enter in URLs that will either allow or block. So I could enter in, say, google.com, and we can choose to allow access to this site. And I could enter in something like adult.com and then choose to block access to this particular one. Now I can also choose to only allow this user to access websites that are explicitly defined in our allow list as well. Now finally, if I want to export this list, I can, and this will save the list out to a file which has a weird extension of web allow block list, but it's only a text file, so you can open it up with Notepad and then we can import those as well. Okay, we can also choose a level of security for this user as well, and that can differ from our own settings on this computer, and we can even block file downloads. Okay, well the rest of these settings here don't relate specifically to IE, so I'm going to skip them and I'll probably cover them in a later video. But once Bob has been on this computer doing his thing, we can click on View Activity Reports and we'll be able to see an overview of Bob's internet activity, showing the top websites that he's visited and the most recent ones that have been blocked, as well as any files he's downloaded or was blocked from downloading. Now if we come over here to the left and expand this Explorer style listing and then expand web browsing, if we click on any of these other folders, then we can get a more complete listing of Bob's browsing habits. Alright, well let's close this now. And back on our Content tab, we can use the Content Advisor to lock down access so people can't view websites that contain unsavory material, like adult material or sites containing violence. So if we enable this, and we'll need to confirm that we actually have clicked this, here we can view the ratings that have been defined by the ICRA, which is an international non-profit body called the International Content Rating Association. And what they do is they classify websites into categories, and here you can choose to allow or block content based on its category. So rather than having to find and list every conceivable website in a block list, you could simply block a category. Now obviously this isn't infallible, as it does rely on the destination website to have a content rating defined. And if you scroll down here, you can see the list of categories here. Alright, so we'll click on OK. And since we've just enabled this feature, we'll need to enter in a supervisor password before we can continue. So I'm just going to enter in a password here, and I'll type it in again to confirm it. Now we can also enter in a password hint here. In fact, if we don't, we'll just click on OK. We will be prompted to do so, but I'm just going to ignore this. Okay, we can see it's been enabled, so we'll click on OK. Alright, we'll just get rid of our menu here, and let's say we'll go to our Yahoo website. And let's go and click on one of these links at the top. Let's say sports. The Content Advisor leaps into action and blocks access to the site. Now sure, I can allow this page or the entire site if I do know the password, but in order to make this perhaps still effective for children, but flexible enough to allow regular web surfing, it will need a bit of configuration. So if we go back to our settings, and we'll need to enter in our password again, and we'll click on the General tab, we can choose here to allow users to view sites that don't have a content rating, and you'll probably find, in all honesty, that most of them don't. Alright, well, if we click on OK, and OK again, and we go back to Yahoo, this time you can see it lets us view the page. Now, it's been my experience that a lot of people really don't use this feature of IE, but if you're really concerned about children visiting sites that you really don't want them to, then I'd suggest that you go back in there and take a look. Okay. Now, most of the other options that we have in IE we'll most likely cover in other videos as they relate to other applications. For example, on the Connections tab here, we can set a dial-up or a VPN connection. If we click on LAN settings, we can configure IE to use a proxy server. On the Programs tab, we can check to see if IE is the default web browser each time we load it. And of course, if it isn't, it's going to throw up a pop-up dialog box and ask you if you want to change it back to the default browser. And of course, we can come in here and make IE the default if it isn't by clicking this button. Now we can manage any add-ons, of course, and we've seen that before. We can also set the default editing program that IE will use when you choose to edit a web page, and in this drop-down box here, it'll list any applications that you have on your system that are capable of editing HTML. Obviously here I've only got Notepad, but if you've got other applications like FrontPage or Dreamweaver installed, you'll see them here as well. Now we can also configure which applications we want to use for other internet services, and this really isn't an IE feature per se. This simply loads up a control panel applet which lets you configure what applications you'll use for email and what other applications for playing audio and video and so on. Okay, finally on the Advanced tab, like in previous versions of IE, we can configure the advanced properties and set how we want to configure, say, printing, for example, or browsing, or security and accessibility options. And in most cases, you probably won't want to change these, but come in here and take a look anyway, as there are some settings that are quite useful. Okay, in this video, we've taken a long and detailed look at Internet Explorer version 7. As you've seen, a fair bit has changed with this new release of Internet Explorer, and at least in my opinion, it's all for the better. With tab browsing, better security, parental controls, RSS feeds and more, it's far superior than anything else Microsoft has ever produced. So if you've jumped ship to Firefox, maybe it's time to come back and take another look at IE, as you'll probably be pleasantly surprised at what this new version has to offer.